Good morning. Today we welcome back Reverend Kristina Church. Reverend Kristina, thanks for making it in from Erie, and it's wonderful to see you again. Reverend Kristina Church grew up all over the country as an Air Force kid, spending most of her childhood and young adulthood in Anchorage, Alaska, which she still considers her hometown. She earned a Master's of Social Work at Columbia University and had a career in social work before becoming a mother later in life. Reverend Kristina graduated from Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago, Illinois, and is the minister at UU Erie. This is our last week working with the Soul Matters theme of resistance, and her sermon is about three icons who resisted the limitations imposed on them. I'm Valerie Davis, today's service leader. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm joined by Jenny Mombrea on piano, Andrew Wills on AV, and Louis Massonet and Lauren Mallow for our kids program. Welcome, members, friends, and visitors to UU of East Aurora. We are a community which believes our differences make us better, a place where all are welcomed, regardless of belief systems, ethnicities, race, gender, sexual orientation, neurodiversity, or economic standing. We are in a safe place. Now, please stand in body or spirit to say hi to a person near you, and even if you've already chatted before settling in, please take a moment to say a quick hello to someone else. And to our 8 participants on Zoom, type into the chat. Are there any announcements?
So I just want to draw everyone's attention to the back of the order of service. It kind of gives you what's coming up, and I want to highlight 2 things in particular. One is we have a special reproductive justice event on Wednesday, May 17th. Judy Geer has been kind enough to facilitate this event with Chris Spicer, who comes from Planned Parenthood of Western New York. So we'll have a vigil, then we'll have a light supper, and then we have the talk and Q&A. And then save the date for the Pride Party. Last year's was fun. This one's going to be better.
Any others?
Yes, so I wanted to give everybody a quick update on the pledge drive that we're in the middle of. So we have a few days to go, and our target was 33,000, and we're at 26,000. And we have about 8 more people yet to pledge, so I think we're going to make it. So keep your fingers crossed. Thanks.
DJ?
I would have thanked everyone who signed up for refreshments. The whole list is filled.
And my announcement is just to remind those who are coming to the CPR certification training next Saturday, May 6th from 9 to noon. If your plans have changed, please let me know, because we are at a full point at this point. So I do have a little bit of a waiting list. And don't forget to bring the $20 in cash or a check made out to Erie One BOCES. So we're gonna have a lot of people with certifications on CPR, so I'm really glad about that. I begin this service by acknowledging that our nation was largely built on the ancestral land of Native nations and the labor of enslaved peoples. May we persevere to achieve a clear understanding of our shared past and utilize these lessons learned for good and for progress. Jenny will now play Lean In Toward the Light by Carrie Newcomer.
Good morning. Thank you for having me back today. I'm so glad to be with you all on this rainy day. It's nice to be cozy inside here in this lovely building. Our opening words this morning are adapted from Angela Herrera. Don't leave your broken heart at the door. Bring it to the altar of life. Don't leave your anger behind. It has high standards, and the world needs vision. Bring them with you, and your joy, and your passion. Bring your loving, and your courage, and your conviction. Bring your need for healing, and your powers to heal. There is work to do, my friends, and you have all that you need to do it. We have all that we need to do it right here in this room. And I will now light the chalice with the words that are found in your order of service. If you'd like to say the words along with me, that would be wonderful. We gather this hour as people of faith with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Well, we will light this beacon of hope as soon as I can. There we go. All right, and now I invite you to join me in singing our rousing opening hymn, which is Now Let Us Sing. It's number 368 in your gray hymnal. Do people know this one, or should we do a little warm-up tutorial thing? A little warm-up tutorial? Okay, all right, let's do it. So Jenny, if you wouldn't mind playing just one of the lines, and we'll see what that sounds like. Yeah, why don't you play it through once, and we'll get it in our head, and then we'll play each one of the lines, and you can decide which one works best for you, or you can move around and sing some, alternate if you want, and we'll see what happens. So Jenny, take it away. All right. So that's what it sounds like when it's all together. And there's that little clap there at the end, which maybe the kids can help us with that one. That's always a really fun thing to do. And it's easy to forget too when you're singing. Okay, so let's maybe take the kind of the bottom line provides the structure for this piece. So if you have a lower voice, you might want to sing this line. If you sing bass or maybe alto, and it goes like this. Sure. And it comes up fast. Now let us sing, 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 sing. Now let us sing, 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 sing. Lift up your voice, be not afraid. Sing to the power of the faith within. And we all have to clap, right? Okay. But it takes a few times around to get into the groove of it.
Welcome, friends. It's Gisa from Butterfly Garden. I have a new story to share with you today. It's called She Persisted, 13 American Women Who Changed the World, written by Chelsea Clinton and illustrated by Alexandra Boyger. Sometimes being a girl isn't easy. At some point, someone probably will tell you no, will tell you to be quiet, and may even tell you your dreams are impossible. Don't listen to them. These 13 American women certainly did not take no for an answer. They persisted. Harriet Tubman was born a slave, and her story could have ended there. Instead, she persisted, escaping from slavery and becoming the most famous conductor on the Underground Railroad. She risked her life many times to lead countless slaves to freedom, including her family, friends, and strangers. Every person she led to freedom arrived safely. I should fight for my liberty as long as my strength lasted. Once, Helen Keller became blind and deaf as a toddler. Few people thought she'd be able to read, write, or speak. But she persisted. Helen learned to do all three and not only became the first person with deaf blindness to graduate from college, but she used her story to help fight for more opportunities for people with disabilities in the United States and around the world. One can never consent to creep when one feels an impulse to soar. After her family fled poverty and the threat of violence in Ukraine for a new home in New York City, Clara Lemlich got a job working at a garment factory. She wrote that the factory's conditions made women into machines, and so she persisted, organizing picket lines and strikes that ultimately helped win better pay, shorter hours, and safer working conditions for thousands of workers, both men and women. I am I am one of those who suffers from the abuses described here, and I move that we go on a general strike. Nellie Bly became a reporter in part because a male writer had said that working women were a monstrosity, and she wanted to prove that women could do anything. At times, putting her safety at risk, she persisted throughout her career in exposing real monstrosities, pretending to be a sweatshop worker and a patient in a mental hospital to show how badly people were being treated. I have never written a word that did not come from my heart. I never shall. Inspired from an early age by her brother's childhood illnesses, Virginia Apgar was determined to be a doctor long before many girls had such dreams. Even though she qualified to be a surgeon, the male head surgeon at her hospital discouraged her because she was a woman. Nevertheless, she persisted, becoming an anesthesiologist and creating the Apgar score to test a newborn's baby health, which hospitals all over the world still use today. Nobody but nobody is going to stop breathing on me. After Maria Tallchief's family moved to California, partly to support Maria's dream of becoming a dancer, she was teased by students in school for her Native American heritage and later was encouraged to change her last name to something that sounded Russian, since many professional dancers at the time were from Russia. She persisted, ignoring all the taunting and poor advice, to become the first great American prima ballerina. It never occurred to me to say it hurts to do that. As a 15-year-old riding a bus home from school in Montgomery, Alabama, Claudette Colvin was expected to give up her seat to a white woman just because she was African American. In her refusal to get up, she persisted in taking a stand for what's right, helping to inspire Rosa Parks to make the same choice 9 months later, an act many point to as starting the modern civil rights movement. I knew then, and I know now, that when it comes to justice, there is no easy way to get it. You can't sugarcoat it. You have to take a stand and say, that is not right. When Ruby Bridges was in kindergarten, many schools across America, particularly in the South, still refused African American students their equal rights to an education. Ruby wouldn't be treated like a second-class student, and she persisted, walking for weeks past angry, hateful protesters to integrate an all-white elementary school in New Orleans. That fateful walk to school began a journey, and we all must work together to continue moving forward. As the first woman to serve as both a U.S. representative and a U.S. senator, Margaret Chase Smith could have let that fact alone be her legacy. Instead, she persisted in championing women's rights and more opportunity for women in the military, standing up for free speech, and supporting space exploration. The head of NASA once noted that we wouldn't have put a man on the moon without Margaret. The right way is not always the popular and easy way. Standing for right when it is unpopular is a true test of moral character. Sally Ride always believed women could succeed in any math or science career. Although not everyone agreed, she persisted and she became the first American woman in space. But that wasn't enough for Sally. She traveled into space once more and then created science and engineering programs specifically for girls so she could help generations of young women achieve their dreams too, both on Earth and in outer space. Young girls need to see role models in whatever careers they may choose, just so they can picture themselves doing those jobs someday. You can't be what you can't see. When, as a kid, Florence Griffith Joyner visited her father in the Mojave Desert, he would urge her to run faster and faster, to run as fast as a jackrabbit. Even when she had to leave college to help support her family, she persisted in training on the track, then went back to school and got faster and faster. Her unbroken world records in the 100-meter and 200-meter sprints set at the 1988 Summer Olympics mean she is still the fastest woman ever. When anyone tells me I can't do anything, I'm just not listening anymore. Oprah Winfrey's grandmother expected Oprah to follow in her footsteps and become a maid. Oprah knew, even as a little girl, that her dreams would take her somewhere else. She persisted in turning those dreams into a reality and became a media superstar, working in movies, books, magazines, theater, and most of all, television, where The Oprah Winfrey Show remains the highest rated show of all time. The biggest adventure you can ever take is to live the life of your dreams. Watching fictional judges on television inspired Sonia Sotomayor to want to be a real-life judge when she grew up. She knew she'd have to speak English as well as she spoke Spanish, study hard in school, and manage her diabetes before she could one day wear a judge's robe with a gavel in her hand. She persisted, eventually becoming a Supreme Court justice and the first ever Latina to sit on America's highest court. So, if anyone ever tells you no, if anyone ever says your voice isn't important or your dreams are too big, remember these women. They persisted, and so should you.
A few months ago, I was preaching what's called a question box service at my congregation that I serve, Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Erie, Pennsylvania. If you've ever seen a question box sermon, basically anyone who comes in the door writes down a question for the person who's giving the sermon. It can be a question about Unitarian Universalism or about ministry or about anything you want to ask. And the person who's giving the sermon kind of has a few minutes to check out the questions and then kind of organize them in a way that makes sense. And then they just start answering questions. And so one curious person during that service asked, and I don't know who it was because they're all anonymous, they asked, are there any Unitarians or Universalists or Unitarian Universalists of the 20th century that you admire and that you would like to share with us? It got me thinking, and I wasn't really able to answer the question during the scope of that question box service, but I thought, that's a great starter seed for a future service. And so I wrote this sermon as an answer to that anonymous person who wanted to know who I admired out of Unitarians, Universalists, and Unitarian Universalists. And as you know, I am also sharing with you all the experience of having a starting point class that we're all learning together about our journeys in Unitarian Universalism, about our history as UUs, and what it means to have UU identity. And I just want to note that in our living tradition, we're always changing and growing and transforming. Our movement is very rich in history and includes many women, both clergy and lay people who are worthy of celebration, just as these famous women that we heard about are. They knocked down barriers by existing, persisting, and in some cases, insisting. They resisted the limitations that others had put on them. And they had some privilege, each of them, and they used it to turn around and knock down barriers for those who came after them. As the Reverend Louis Fisher, a Unitarian Universalist, a Universalist minister once noted, Universalists are often asked to tell where they stand. The only true answer to give to this question is that we do not stand at all, we move. So we are consistently moving into the future and hopefully drawing the circle wider and wider as we go, becoming more inclusive, inviting more people to join us in this covenantal faith. Part of that movement comes through the efforts of these extraordinary individuals who make a way out of no way and who then leave a path for others to follow in their wake. So today I'm going to talk about 3 women from our tradition. They are women who lived in the 20th century, and they all left a large impression on our faith. And each has a special significance in my heart as well. So I'm just really looking forward to sharing them with you today. Our first iconic, persistent UU, or actually she was a Unitarian, is Reverend Olympia Brown. Has anyone heard of Olympia Brown? You can raise your hand if you've heard of her. So Olympia Brown's life exemplifies, among many other qualities, the stubborn refusal to take no for an answer. In other words, she persisted. Having decided in young adulthood that she was going to become a minister, she simply refused to be dissuaded from that plan. Her Universalist family must have deeply valued education. Her father built a schoolhouse on his property, on their farm, in order to attract a teacher to their area so that his daughters could get an education. Later, the entire family moved from their home in Michigan to Yellow Springs, Ohio, so that Olympia and her sisters would have the opportunity to attend Antioch College. It was there that Olympia first heard a woman named Antoinette Brown, who was no relation, preach. She had never had the opportunity to hear a woman preach before in her life. Hearing this happen for the first time, she reported, made her feel as though the kingdom of heaven were at hand. Upon graduation from Antioch College, the next step in her logical journey to becoming a minister was seminary. But in 1860, the year that she began to apply, no American seminaries were accepting women. Here, I quote the excellent Dictionary of UU Biography, because I just love the way they put this. The Unitarian Universalist School, the Unitarian School of Meadville, Pennsylvania, which is very close to Erie, right, replied to her request for admission, saying that the trustees thought it would be too great an experiment to admit a woman. Oberlin replied to her that she could be admitted, but would not be able to participate in public commencement exercises. That burns, doesn't it? Finally, Ebenezer Fisher, the president of the Universalist Divinity School at St. Lawrence University in New York, offered her admission, but he added that he did not think women were called to the ministry. But, he said, I leave that between you and the great head of the church. This, Olympia thought, was exactly where it should be left, with the great head of the church. But when I arrived, she writes, I was told that I had not been expected, and that Mr. Fisher had said I would not come, as he'd written discouragingly to me. I had supposed his discouragement to be my encouragement. I love that. His discouragement was my encouragement. It sounds like it would go really well on a bumper sticker, doesn't it? Or maybe it's the prequel to She Was Warned, but nevertheless, she persisted. It could even be a line from a rap musical. So if anyone wants to write a rap musical about the life of Olympia Brown, I've got a great line for you. She might as well have said, his resistance was my persistence, right? Well, thus encouraged or discouraged and matriculated, Olympia began her studies. 2 years later, with her degree in hand, she had the uphill battle of convincing her denomination to allow her ordination and then allow her to seek employment. Again, her determination and persistence won out against their doubts. And eventually, after many, many times of trying, she became the first woman ordained by a denomination in the United States. Soon afterwards, she was called by the congregation in Weymouth, Massachusetts. Is it Weymouth or Weymouth? I don't even know. Does anyone know? Weymouth, okay. Her storied career had begun. Along the way, Olympia met and married her husband. She had 2 healthy children after the age of 40. She served several congregations in Wisconsin and one that now bears her name in Racine, Wisconsin. She worked with Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton for women's suffrage. She spoke at over 300 engagements in Kansas over a 4-month period. And finally, living long enough to be one of the few original suffragists to be able to vote in an election when the vote for women was finally achieved. That must have been such a sweet moment for her at the ballot box. Reverend Olympia Brown's extraordinary life cheers me whenever something happens that could potentially discourage me. She died in her late 80s, and by all accounts, she was still rabble-rousing and pissing people off well into her final years. Her love of justice and her commitment to working towards greater opportunity for all people is how she expressed her love of this world. And we have a personal connection in Erie because her name adorns our fellowship hall. So whenever we have coffee, we have it in the Olympia Brown room. So she has a special connection for us. The second person I want to share, the second persister and resistor, is Mary Augusta Safford, who comes from our Unitarian heritage. Mary Safford was born in 1851 on a farm in Hamilton, Illinois, and she showed her vocation very early, practicing for her calling as a little girl by preaching childhood sermons from a tree stump on the farm for her family and her friends, who included one Eleanor Gordon, a neighbor girl who was close in age to Mary. These 2 girls formed a lifelong friendship, and they decided early on that they would do their best to join the clergy together. Both of their families had some ties to conventional Christian denominations, alongside some strains of quirky frontier theology that influenced both girls' spiritual development. Now, despite discouragement from family members who didn't think they would be able to do it, they did accomplish their wild girlhood dreams. Mary, with her charismatic preaching ability, strong literary bent, and shrewd leadership skills, was ordained, and she was called to a church community she helped gather in 1871 in Humboldt, Iowa. They did this mostly by refusing to give up. In other words, they just kept on persisting. They just rolled through everyone's objections and just decided they were going to do ministry, and they did it. Now, throughout their ministries, Eleanor and Mary grew and nurtured this very famous community of women ministers They came to be called the Iowa Sisterhood. Has anyone heard of the Iowa Sisterhood? Yeah, all right. I see a few Iowa Sisterhood fans out there. Their Midwestern pastorates were low in pay, low in prestige. They were newer congregations in under-resourced frontier towns that didn't have a lot of money to pay a minister. These were positions that male ministers wouldn't even consider. These women fought to get into established theological schools like Meadville in Pennsylvania and Lombard in Chicago, which those two schools eventually merged and became Meadville Lombard, which is where I went to school. And yet, even with all these vulnerabilities, with all these strikes against them, their congregations continually grew and thrived and prospered. Now, Mary's life also has a warning in it about the dangers of persistence past the point that is healthy. For Mary often drove herself to exhaustion, and at least once she collapsed and nearly died from fatigue and exhaustion from all the pressure that was put on her as a female minister. So it's important to know when to rest, right? Rest is the other side of that equation. Persistence is important, and so is discretion. That's the better part of valor, and the ability to understand when we need to take a break and restore our bodies and spirits. Mary Safford is a Unitarian icon for all of these reasons, and for me, she embodies the power of love in action. She felt that the human soul could only evolve through participation in a community, transforming daily common tasks, making them divine by, as she said, participating together in a spirit of love and helpfulness. She deeply believed in this power of community, which for her superseded any doctrine or creed. She nurtured her colleagues, and she encouraged all those who came along behind her. She worked tirelessly for the Unitarian denomination through her ties to statewide and national offices. And finally, I feel a special connection to her and to Eleanor Gordon because in their quote-unquote retirement, which I use loosely, they founded the First Unitarian Church of Orlando, Florida, which is a church where one of my very best friends, the Reverend Margalit Belizaire, was called in 2021 and currently serves. And so I've had the pleasure of attending her installation at that church, and the last time I visited her in Orlando, there was a new plaque on the grounds of the campus of the church that was a historic marker sharing about Mary Safford and Eleanor Gordon. So that was a fun little moment to mark. Now, finally, I want to talk to you about my third icon of Unitarian Universalism, which we finally arrived at, the merger of the two denominations. And I want to tell you a little bit about Denise Davidoff, or Denny, as she was known. Does anyone recognize that name? She was sort of a national figure. If you ever went to General Assembly, she would probably be front and center during certain years. Denise Taft Davidoff grew up on Long Island in a very conservative Jewish family. She later said that the patriarchal religion of her birth sent her seeking a much more liberal faith during adulthood. So when Denny, as she became known, and her husband Jerry found Unitarian Universalism after persisting in looking for a religion that would fit their beliefs and their outlook. And this was right around the time of our merger of the two denominations in the early 60s. And when Jerry and Denny found this open, inclusive religion, it was love at first sight, love at first experience. And it was immediate and deep and abiding for both of them. It was love that became an amazing partnership. For Denny became more and more involved in the larger movement of Unitarian Universalism. She and Jerry eventually were awarded its highest volunteer award in 2006, the award for distinguished service to the cause of Unitarian Universalism. At her death in 2017, her obituary in the UU World shared the following summation of her life. Perhaps no UU layperson was so visible to so many over the last half century. She never missed a General Assembly after attending her first of 50 in 1968. At the 2017 GA, she delivered an impassioned appeal to give generously to the Living Tradition Fund. In addition to presiding over 8 assemblies as a moderator, she held leadership positions in a long list of UU groups, preached in more than 100 congregations, and mentored generations of ministers and lay leaders who are shaping our faith today. Denny Davidoff served as moderator of the UUA, its highest volunteer position, facilitating business meetings at the General Assembly. It's said that people would go to the business meetings just to hear the way that she managed them, with humor and grace and unflappability as she spoke before thousands of people. And if you've ever been to a General Assembly business meeting, you know it's really saying something that people wanted to go to hear, just to hear her. Now, Denny also made stewardship her thing. And at the same time that she was helping to widen the circle of concern for Unitarian Universalists, bringing anti-oppression programs and gender-inclusive language and other important theological expressions of our principles and our values. She would steamroll right past people's resistance. She would persist in her insistence that we needed to widen the circle of concern. And she often would continue asking people for donations and money. And her favorite phrase was that people should give until it feels good. And they usually did. Well, these 3 women certainly embodied the idea of persistence as resistance. They developed their amazing talents and skills in the service of our faith. And I hope that each of us can take a spark of inspiration from hearing about their lives today. We need not have the stunning courage of Olympia Brown to knock down every barrier that she ever came across, but we can find something of her determination and spunk in our hearts. We need not be able to preach like an angel, as Mary Safford could, or found new congregations everywhere we go, but perhaps something of her belief in the power of community can live in our hearts as well. We need not speak before thousands, as Denny Davidoff could and did, and yet perhaps we can find something of her grace and her vision for the future of Unitarian Universalism. For if we love this faith as they did, we can also dig deep within and find the generosity of spirit that defines this movement at its best. We need not have great wealth or soaring talents or oodles of time to donate, but each of us can give something. Each of us has a great gift to offer. Each of us matters in caring for this faith that has a life beyond ourselves. And so if you haven't found the exact place where you fit in to Unitarian Universalism, I invite you to keep persisting, to find the place that's right for you, to find the place where your joy meets our movement's great need. May you find that place, and may it help you grow and help our faith grow as well. Thank you so much for listening. For our closing hymn, we're going to have another hymn adventure today. So we have, do we have the teal hymnals out or no? Oh, okay. So let's see. Yeah, this one's in the teal hymnal, and it's not as hard to sing as it might look at first glance. What it is it's hard to play. So we're glad we have a really awesome pianist. Jenny is going to help us through this. As we pass out the hymnals, I'll just tell you, we're going to sing verse 1 and verse 3 today, okay? And let's just, let's see how it goes. We're going to take it nice and slow and easy today, okay? Thank you. Thanks for being willing to try a less familiar hymn out. That's always an adventure and a good one. I'm going to extinguish the chalice now, and if you're joining us at home and you've lit a candle or chalice, I invite you to extinguish yours as well, as we say these beloved words by Elizabeth Sella Jones. They're in your order of service as well. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. All right. And I have closing words in my book that I've lost. Let me see here. Too many books today. Okay, I left one at my chair. All right, these words are from Judith Meyer. This is what we do with our faith. Live in this world knowing that we will lose each other, loving despite the hard bargain it demands of us, doing what we can so that truth may be safely lived, measuring our faith by the difference we have made, building up faith communities to continue after we are gone. May it be so.